Today I'm going to start off by telling you a fairy tale. There's a fairy tale that South Africans have grown to believe, and that is that apartheid ended when one morning F.W. de Klerk woke up and decided to release Nelson Mandela from jail. There was a couple of conversations and negotiations at Cadessa, and suddenly we all voted in 1994 and apartheid was over. That's kind of the short fairy tale version of how apartheid ended. But I want to tell you the true story today. It was a lot messier than that. A hell of a lot messier than that. What were the real reasons that apartheid ended? Economic sanctions, growing isolation, mothers not wanting their sons to go and join the army to uphold the system, local objections to the act, a far more bigger response from the black majority in South Africa who were unhappy living under apartheid. Those were the real reasons that apartheid grew. But there was the even bigger reason why it never worked at all, was that from the very, very inception, an idea of telling people what they can and can't do never works. And eventually it collapses under the weight of its own inconsistencies. And this is what happened to apartheid. Now remember, under apartheid, the law was that they could tell everybody where they would live, where they would work, and what jobs they would do. It even got so bad that they would tell people who they could love. It's not surprising, therefore, that apartheid never really worked the way that the people who wrote it thought it would work. And soon enough, it collapsed, because little by little there were cracks that were forming. In fact, it was brilliantly put together by Trevor Noah when he wrote his book, Born a Crime, story of, biography of his life, where his white father and his black mother give birth to a colored child. And in actual fact, all three of them are breaking the law just because they love each other. It's that kind of inconsistency that brings down bad law. So, why am I telling you this story? I'm telling you this story is because we have reached that level now with Black Economic Empowerment, BEE. It's busy collapsing under the weight of its own inconsistencies. So let's look at how BEE came about. Well, it came about in the 1980s, and its roots are with the very large South African mining companies of the day, largely, Anglo-American. Good idea. You're making a fortune by mining stuff. They come out with this idea. What we'll do is to keep our little cozy mining arrangement going, where we mine, sell the stuff and make billions of dollars. We'll cut the incoming black government in. Prominent ANC-linked politicians get shares in these mining companies. That's why we have a fabulously wealthy president to this day, Cyril Ramaphosa. People like Patrice Motsepe. You don't go and get some great South African black engineer. You get somebody who's politically connected. You give them a small stake in a big company, and you just carry on business as usual. That was the roots of BEE in South Africa. Now, the fact that it starts with mining should make all the sense in the world to you, because mining, by definition, is a business that lends itself towards corruption. Right? Any extraction of a resource lends itself to corruption. Why? It's quite a simple business. It may be technically difficult, and you need engineers, and you need this and that and stuff. But once you've now got your mine going or your oil well going, that thing is literally extracting cash out of the ground. Right? You don't have to market your gold. You don't have to market your platinum or your oil. You just go to a very, very big international market and say, I've got a ton of gold to sell, I've got 1 million barrels of oil to sell, and there's a price, and it just goes onto a ship and it goes to the buyer. It is, once it leaves your premises, it has no name, it has no brand name on it. It is just that resource. And pretty soon, some people, some heavies with guns arrive at your business and they say, look, we see you just extracting money. Cut us in, and, these guns will walk out of the room. And, for as long as there's been mining, which is forever, miners and resource extractors have been accustomed to paying bribes. BE was just another mining bribe. What happened with BE? They realized, well, hang on. The mines realized it's a hell of a lot easier to pay the government so that the heavies never arrive at your door. In actual fact, we'll just do this nice and cleanly. So you get politically connected people there, and nobody ever questions your mining activities. As long as the big guy who can phone people up, and when the miners are getting restless, say, take concomitant action. That's all he has to do every now and again. He gets his billions. You get your more billions, and everybody's happy. But now this model doesn't work so well in other businesses. It doesn't work that well in industry or retail, because those are messy businesses. If you are manufacturing something, you need a factory, you need resources, you need raw materials, you then need machinery, you need people. It's then got to turn it into a product. And then, of course, the most important thing is that your sales cycle is quite difficult, because it's not like you can just go to a market and sell your ton of gold. Here you have to get different people that you supply, or different customers. You've got to make these things in different sizes. You've got to cater to different tastes. You've got to market it to people. Those businesses are harder to shake down than mining businesses. But yet we put this blanket over everybody. BE must happen to everybody. So that is really why the roots are there in mining and how BE came to South Africa.
Every business needs a world-class video to show to your clients and prospective clients. When the StreamIn team isn't filming the state of the nation, they are producing those world-class videos for companies just like yours. They have got all of the equipment, drones, microphones, whatever you need, and the technical know-how to film a proper video for your company. Visit their website.
Which brings us to what has happened recently in South Africa, and that is Starlink. Now, for those that don't know, Starlink is a business owned by South African-born entrepreneur and the richest man in the world, Elon Musk. And as you may or may not know, Elon Musk became famous because he created SpaceX, which is a spaceship shuttle business that sends rockets into space, and their biggest clients send satellites up into space. And he has literally put thousands of satellites in space. And one of the byproducts of the satellite that he's got in space is that he's created Starlink, which is an internet company where you don't need lines, you don't need wires. You connect via the satellite up there. And it gives you, as advertised, yet to test it, high-speed internet. And as you can imagine, it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter if you're in the middle of a big city or the middle of a jungle. There's a satellite thousands of miles above you, and the link goes up, and so it goes to you, and wonderful. You can be in, you don't have to be in Pretoria, you can be in Pofadder and get great internet. That is the idea. So Starlink has become a great service, especially in Africa, where you don't have a lot of fiber-linked services or great cell technology, etc. So it's literally been ubiquitous throughout Africa because it solved a problem. It leapfrogged, as they say. So you went straight past telephone lines, straight past fiber cables to satellites. So the question is, does South Africa need Starlink? And the answer is absolutely. And the question then becomes, why do we need Starlink? Well, South Africa's a big country and we don't have great internet coverage around the rest of the country. So of course people could argue, but we've got these great big cell companies, cellular companies, MTN, Vodacom. Why don't they just plug the service? Well, those companies were born out of BEE. Right? When those licenses were being granted in the early 90s, it was the heyday of BEE, buying influence. And if you look at those boards, they are full of ANC connected people. Why do I raise that specifically? Because those companies born like that were born with a straight line into government. And what was the next part? On the one part, you've got a politically connected person that gets you the business that you want. But on the other hand, most importantly, by having your politically connected person, he keeps out the competition. So you go and you get the former Deputy Minister of Finance, Mcebisi Jonas, as your chairman of MTN, and he ensures that the government, because he has to make a phone call, he makes sure that you create legislation that makes it so difficult for you or I if we ever wanted to start a cellular company, right? And that is why South Africa sits with the kind of monopolies that we do, because in just about every industry, big companies have got their politically connected persons sitting on their board, and they have ensured that the legislation is written to keep out any competition. So, if you've got a monopoly of something like cellular phones and the services that have developed from there, which has included internet, you're making so much money out of the cities that you don't have to worry about the small town in the Northern Cape. Why should you? To go and make a couple of 100,000 rand? Well, no, I don't need to do that. I'm making billions out of the cities. But it could be an attractive business to a small company. But remember, the legislation's written to keep people out, and we don't want anybody in, so you can't go and start your small service in a small town. That has been the reason why the South African economy doesn't grow. It doesn't grow because our big companies have got BEE to save them. And it saves them more because it keeps small competitors out. Okay? Now let's go back to Starlink. Starlink, the question is, do we need it? We've already answered that. Yes, we do. What would be the real value of Starlink? Well, the real value for Starlink has been these underserved areas, mainly in our rural areas. Our towns are dying because they've become more and more remote. As we've moved into this information age, you can't get decent internet in some small town. It's been a business killer. We also have terrible education in those towns because, you're going to have to truck exam papers to these places. And how do you communicate with teachers? Safety and security. Police stations can't be online because there's no internet service. So it could provide a vital solution for South Africa. So we do need Starlink, or a service like that. So what happens? Well, recently, if you're following the news, the DA Minister of Communications, Solly Malatsi, driven, I think, to try and make the moribund ANC look bad, has he has made a recommendation that there's a change to the BEE law in ICT and communication. So instead of paying the 30% BEE bribe that the ANC wanted to charge Starlink, he wants to turn this into a wonderful thing. It is called a equity equivalent investment program. So instead of putting 30% in and giving it away to somebody else that used to be a minister of what, you go about investing, you force a Starlink to invest in local suppliers, skills development, infrastructure, and small business. Now that sounds grand, but here's the problem. Don't South African entrepreneurs do this already? I'm talking about small businessmen. I'm not talking about the big companies with politically connected people. I'm talking about you and I. It's exactly what we do, right? We buy from local suppliers. We support small business by definition in our daily lives. We train our staff. That's skills development. We pay salaries. We generate those taxes. Why don't we get a concession? So, in other words, a company like Starlink is going to be allowed to operate in South Africa merely doing what you and I have to do anyway. Or we do it anyway, and we do it happily. But we've got the extra tax of saying comply with this law or else you won't be able to operate. You won't be able to deal with government. You won't be able to deal with big corporates. Basically, your business just will not be viable. And that is why the South African economy isn't growing. So I'm saying it's one or the other. Either we give the concession to Starlink, which I think we should, but then we should give the concession to everybody. Or we must apply the law as it's written, as ridiculous as it is, let the economy shrink even more, let our unemployment grow to 80%. So eventually all we've got, the only people who are employed are our parliamentarians. And BEE starts collapsing under the weight of its own inconsistencies. It's one way or another. It can't be both. So I'm hoping that this Starlink ruling leads to the end of BEE. It's going to happen. It's just a question of when, because it's busy collapsing as we speak. The one company that isn't collapsing, thanks to your support, is Pace Car Rental. Please use them and get a discount. And another company that's not collapsing, well, it's not quite a company, is the State of the Nation, which is growing tremendously, and we are on 100,000 watch. Please subscribe to the channel, and thank you for joining us today.